by being unapologetically pro-Black women, I'm better for everybody. We as men are held hostage to this man body, which leaves very, very little room for us to be our authentic selves. People being invested in how I live more than how I die. I think of people celebrating my life more than mourning my life. Yes. I could be on a podcast or speaking to a group of people, and a large percentage of the room is white folks. 50 years ago, that would be a rarity. 100 years ago, it would just not happen. People have given their life and their life work to give me that opportunity. Leaving the world better than I was birthed into it. I also know that it's not about instant gratification.
Welcome to Leave It Better. My dad says every person we meet leaves a mark on our lives, and every choice we make can leave a mark on the world. This is a space for hope, for love, and for stories that remind us we are all connected. So take a deep breath and let's leave it better together.
Hello, everybody. This is the Leave It Better podcast. I am your host, Dwayne Daniels, and I have a great guest today. Most of my guests are great, obviously, but this is a special guest because it came by a long-term friend of mine, Miss Annette Porter. I get to meet her wonderful dad, Mr. Tony Porter. I think he's a very inspirational person, someone that shows up the right way. And I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of introduction of who he is. He's an author. He's an educator, an activist who has spent decades working to advance social justices and expand conversation about what it means to be a man today. He is the co-founder and CEO of Call to Men, a national nonprofit focused on engaging men and boys in building healthier, more honest ideas about manhood and preventing violence against women and girls. Today, Tony is widely known for a powerful TED Talk called The Men, which challenges the rigid expectations often placed on boys and men and has reached millions of viewers around the world. He is also the author of The Breaking Out of the Man Box, The Next Generation of Manhood. And his work has included advising organizations such as the NFL, the NBA, along with schools and community organizations across the country. Please welcome Mr. Tony Porter.
Thank you there, brother. Dwayne, it's good to be in your presence. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. So thank you for taking the time to sit with me. I'm extremely grateful for it.
Yeah, for sure.
So Tony, I know we just mentioned, your stats, what I like to call your stats, because, I'm a big sports fan, and, you look at the back of your baseball card or football card, and that's for like your history of the player you are, right? So we talked about your stats, but what I'm curious is, who are you today?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. I'm a lot of things to a lot of different people. I'm a husband, I'm a father, uh, I'm a brother, uncle, cousin. I'm very much a leader in my family, my extended family. And when I think about when I think about work, I'm the CEO of my organization.
Mhm.
And the work we do, what I do is less what I do and more of who I am.
Mm,
For the work of a call to men. I'm unapologetically pro-Black women,
yes, sir.
and that doesn't mean that I disrespect other folks. I think by being unapologetically pro-Black women, I'm better for everybody as it relates to that. I know for some folks that statement might feel negative, but the truth of the matter is, by virtue of saying and being unapologetically pro-Black women, I serve all people well, at least starting from that position.
Yes. And I think that's it's necessary, right? It's unfortunate that we have to live in that space, but it's a necessary space. We need to be advocates for Black women, in all spaces. And I strongly support your language that you're using with that, because I am the same way. I love Black women. Obviously, my mom's a Black. Obviously, my mom is Black. She's West Indian. And, I saw the things that she's gone through, coming up and what she had to endure. So I'm with you 1,000% on that. So what I wanted to ask you is, can you take me in a moment in your life when you realized that how you showed up actually mattered? Not what you said, but your actual presence, right? Like, I think, especially as Black men, I feel like the microscope is always on us, right? It's always on us. So, can you take me back to a moment when when your presence spoke for you or had to speak for you?
Well, I mean, look, Dwayne, there are so many moments
Mm,
throughout my life. There's so many moments. What comes to mind with that question is because you live up in Rockland County, New York. Am I correct?
I'm in Orange County, not too far
Orange
from Rock.
County, not too far. Yeah, not too far. But I worked in Rockland County, New York, and for
Okay.
your viewers, that's like 30 minutes north of the
Yep.
Bronx. If you know New York City, Bronx is at the top of New York City, and Rockland County is about 30 minutes north of that. And I was director of addiction services at the
Mm,
hospital there called Nyack Hospital. Now it's part of, I believe, Montefiore Hospital, but at that
okay.
time it was called Nyack Hospital, little town called Nyack in Rockland County. The hospital is one of the largest employers in the county, probably about 2,000 or so people. And 100 folks actually run the hospital, and it's called the operations group. And I was part of that group. And for the most part, throughout my entire time at the hospital, never been more than 5 Black or brown people as part of that group. And we usually averaged around 3. And
Mm,
throughout that entire time, I was the only Black man.
wow.
The others were Black or brown women that made up that 3 to 5 out of 100. So my responsibilities in showing up in that space as a Black man was important without words even being shared, as well as my responsibilities as I moved around the hospital with the hospital staff knowing who I was in respect to not just the services I provided, but being a part of that operations group. I would have many Black and brown employees in the hospital that would want to talk to me about an experience they were having or something that possibly I can help them work through, or maybe leading them to someone they could talk to about X, Y, and Z. So
Hmm.
whether it's with the staff in the hospital or with that particular group of people, how I showed up, spoken or not, was always very important.
So how did you, I would imagine there's a lot of pressure there, right? To kind of stay, I don't want to say toe the line, right? Because you want to be yourself, but you also know there's a certain expectation that might be put upon you. How did you handle that pressure during that time?
Well, I think one of the most important things is when you're in these spaces, and in many cases you're alone, meaning is you, one or two of you in these spaces, that you don't, outside of those spaces, you have to build your own network of
Right.
folks that have similar experiences or just understand your experience because you're already, quote unquote, sort of kind of alone
Right.
in how you're negotiating these spaces, but you can't stay alone. You have
Right.
to build a network of folks that you can be connected to that can help you negotiate these spaces, and not only negotiate the spaces physically speaking,
Hmm.
but emotionally speaking, right? The impact that is having on you. Because the truth be told, you get so used to it, you normalize it.
Mm,
And when you normalize it, you're not really paying attention to the impact it's having on you
mm,
emotionally, physically, etc. So and we've normalized many spaces as people, because you're in them, they're not
huh,
changing, and it just becomes part for course, but you have to have those outlets.
yeah.
So I've always belonged to different groups of people, that serve as support groups, that serve as, today we might call coaches
Hmm.
and the likes. Back then we might call them mentors, or just my go-to, you know?
Right. No,
Always having that.
I think that's super important. Who were your go-to? Like, because I would imagine, like, because I think about my dad, right? He was a Vietnam vet, and when he came back, there was not a lot of support for him. Mental health was nothing to be talked about, really, coming back, especially a black man coming back from that war. Who did you lean on? Because I feel like as men, we didn't have those spaces like to talk to somebody, or if you're talking to another man, kind of speaking almost to the man box, you're kind of fitting into this mode of what a man is supposed to be. I'm not supposed to tell you I'm suffering, right? I'm not supposed to tell you I'm going through something, I'm emotional right now. So who did you lean on? Like, who did you trust to talk about those things that you were dealing with?
If I'm going back then, because mind you now, I'm going back 20 years ago,
Hmm.
right? As far as the experience I shared with you at the hospital. I left the hospital in 2006 to go
Hmm.
full time with a call to men. So we're
Right.
talking exactly 20 years ago.
Wow.
When I think back then, I had really, in my role at the hospital, heading up the substance use programs, while the biological model that you use in addiction services is important and it serves you well, I had also begun to create a socio-economical model of people and their experiences with substance use. And in that model, the issue of group oppression is important, whether it's classism, racism, sexism, etc. So I have began doing a lot of work on the state level around creating curricula and programs that really looked at addiction through what we were calling a social justice treatment model, not just a biological treatment model. And so I had begun to develop a network of black and brown. What? No, it's not. I'm not going to just say black and brown. I'm just going
Hmm.
to say people who really were looking at issues around racism, sexism, etc., classism. Back then, we were repealing the Rockefeller drug
Hmm.
laws that fostered mass incarceration for small amounts of drugs. All of that was going on back then. And
Yep.
so I really met a network of people that really began to serve purposes for me around not only the experiences of being the only black man in leadership at the hospital, but also just in the direction my work was going in and the way I was leading, which eventually led to starting a call to men.
Mm.
Uh, so I had a network, but to your question, what's really interesting as I think about it, regardless of the names of the people, what I will say though is that network was largely women,
Wow.
uh, black women, a few Jewish women that I can think of. Rockland County, New York is a large Jewish community as well. And I had a few real allies that were Jewish women.
Hmm.
Definitely had black women in that space with me as well. I think the important thing is, to your question, is many of my allies, my go-to people were women. I was doing work with an organization back then called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. They were, I'm going back some time, a premier undoing racism organization. I was connected to them as
Hmm.
well. I had a couple of dudes too that were in these spaces. That I could talk to. I remember particularly a Latino brother that I would spend a lot of time with in these spaces that would, so yeah, there was a network of folks uh that I had, it wasn't again, and I'm still kind of like that today. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's
Right.
not a good thing, but I'm kind of the dude where I don't give everything to one person. I don't have, and I know some people have that, and I think it's a beautiful thing, but
Right.
it's not me. I'm not the dude that would have uh, one person that gets all of me,
Right.
right? I got folks kind of siloed up. If I want to
Hmm.
talk about relationships, I might talk to this dude. If I want to talk about, the work of a call to men as it relates to issues of gender. I might be talking to this person. If I want to, if it's something that's very, very, very personal to me, I might have this person. It might be my wife. It could be one of my kids. You know what I mean? But I'm
Mhm.
not like, I know some people have that one person that gets all of them. I've never been that guy, and whether it's in my personal life or my professional life. And I don't really, and again, my professional life in many respects is my personal life. So,
Right.
they're very blended.
Yeah, I can see that. I think I'm the same way. I don't think there's any one person. I think because we're all complex individuals, right? We have different sides of us, and I think the key thing about talking to other people is this perspective, right? There's a different perspective that you can bring to me that maybe I haven't thought about, and I'm the same way. I share in pieces, and like you said, I don't know if it's the right way or wrong way, but that's just who I am as well. Sometimes it's harder for me to share because I'm the person that wants to show up the right way for everybody and do the right thing, make sure everyone's okay. And sometimes it's harder for me to say, hey, I need help. Okay, I want to talk about this. This is what's going on in my life. When the first question a lot of times is, hey, Dwayne, man, you got a minute, right? Like, yeah, I got a minute. Sure, no problem. But to your what you're saying is, yeah, I agree. I think it's because we're typically we are complex people. We're not made to be like one way. It's the same way when you kind of grow up and they tell you, you go to school, your education, you do this one thing, this is what you go to school for, right? And that's it. But I feel like we're made up of so many pieces that you should be able to explore other things in your life, and I think that's what makes the network so great because it opens up possibilities for you. Like me just sitting down and having this conversation with you is a possibility to get to know you and how you think. And now I can be influenced in a way that, wow, you know what? I love the perspective that Tony came through with this, but we never do that if we don't have these different conversations.
Yeah, look, the network is cool. Everybody should have it,
Yeah.
right? But as men, we also need to grapple with, you know, our collective socialization, right? At a call to men, we would call it the man box,
Mm-hmm.
right? That teaches us, should I say, and teaches us that men don't ask for help, men don't offer help, men don't accept help, that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we're socialized that women are the weaker gender, not men.
Right.
And we're taught to define what it means to be a man in many respects by distancing ourselves from the experience of women and girls. So if women
Right.
ask for help, we don't. Men are strong, women are weak. Asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
When we go about our business as men, I'll say one thing first, that whole notion of weakness, while we know that's a facade, is not true.
Right.
But you'll rarely hear a man use the word weak in relationship to himself, right? He might say, I ain't feeling it today, but
Right.
he's not gonna say I'm feeling weak, right? So for those of your viewers who might immediately say, hold up, what are you talking about? Well, I'll ask your viewers, that are men, do you ever use the word weak in respect to yourself? And most of us will say, no, I don't, even though I know what's happening in the moment is I'm weak, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
come up with another way of saying that. That's important because once we can acknowledge that, then our conversation, our discussion can go further into, well, if we don't use the word weak at all, ever in respect to ourselves, there's something in there for us around asking for help
Mm-hmm.
is a sign of weakness. I think it's really important to lift that up for your male viewers because this inability to ask for help, I know we're talking about networking and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and why I might be one of those dudes that have all my relationships kind of siloed up and I have like a category of people that I can go to. I go to you for this, I go for you for this. I'm also saying there's something about that ain't cool and I need to be better. But that thing about men and asking for help. I just want to lean into that because it's killing us as men. When you think about the trauma that we experience as men and our inability to ask for help, and then the realization that hurt people hurt other people, that's important for us to address as men. When you think about the mental health challenges that we have, right, as men, so much goes unaddressed, right? Men complete suicide 4 times at the rate of women. There's a reason for that, right? There's a reason for that. So I know we kind of got off on the sidebar here, but when I heard you mention the challenges of sometimes asking for help,
Mhm.
I think it's fair for us to lean into that a little bit
Absolutely. Absolutely.
as men. They say about 6 million men go undiagnosed a year for anxiety and depression. I had a friend who completed suicide and he was clinically depressed for a long, long time. But in the Black community, he was just like a cool dude. He was chill.
Mhm.
No, he wasn't just chill. He was clinically depressed,
Wow.
but it went unchecked, undiagnosed, And so this thing with men and asking for help or this inability to ask for help is really, really important that we address that.
No, I agree. And this whole podcast is a conversation. So, right, for me, it's never about it's not just having to stay on the topic. It's just two men having a conversation. And I relate it to us just if we had these cameras off and nothing was recording, this is the conversation we would be having, right? And I think that was an important thing to bring up. And so what do you think needs to change for that, for men to change, right? Like what in society has to change? What in us has to change for us to start, having those more difficult conversations and asking for help?
Yeah. Well, if I come back to this man box, right? In this box, what I'm talking about is the collective socialization of manhood,
Right.
right? How we are collectively socialized, what we are taught. It doesn't mean we all do the same thing, but it means we all have a degree of understanding of these expectations around this collective socialization. So if you looked at it through the lens of a man box, and it's one of the reasons we use that particular way of speaking about it, because it works with men, it works with youth, it works with young men. When we would ask men to take a box, and we're going to call it the man box, and think of all the ingredients in that box that define what it means to be a man, and men will then quickly tell you. If I said, tell me about the collective socialization of manhood, they might say, what the hell are you talking about? But if I say, tell me what's in that man box, what are the ingredients? And men will quickly tell you, be tough, be strong, be aggressive, be dominating. Don't share your feelings and emotions with the exception of anger, right? Don't be vulnerable, always be in control. Don't be too nice, too caring, too loving, too kind, too anything, because all of that is a slippery slope to being a victim and weakness. In short, define what it means to be a man by distancing ourselves from the experience of women and girls, right? So if women and girls can share their emotions and feelings, we as men, we can't. If women and girls can ask for help, we can't. So defining so much of what it means to be a man by distancing ourselves from the experience of women and girls. The man
Right.
box would teach us as men to be a role self, ROLE, more than your whole self, WHOLE. We're kind of being held hostage to this box and a lot of the teaching. Some of us know it ain't working for us, but there's a fear of getting too far out of it. We also know that homophobia, the fear of being perceived as gay, is the glue that keeps the box together. Right. There's not a lot of space for men to be their authentic selves, right?
Right.
In this box. This box also requires us to have a lack of interest in the experience of women and girls outside of those we love and care about. So if I demonstrate an interest in the experience of women and girls, and sexual conquest is not my goal, and she's not my sister, my mom, or someone real close to me, men would want to know why that's important to me. In the average women's studies course of 30 students, you might have 2 or 3 men. And then we collectively as men, if we were asked, why are those 3 men in that class? Men will say they're gay, That would be a reason a man is in that
Mhm.
class. Or he's there to meet women. That would be a
Mhm.
reason he's in that class. But if he's not gay, and not that that's an issue at all,
Right.
let's say he's not gay, and let's say he's not there to meet women, we would be kind of stuck as men as to, well, what is he doing in that class? Because if
Right.
the reasons he's in that class is purely and solely and simply to learn about the experience of women and girls, for most of us as men, we're going to have to sit back on that one and kind of figure out how to. And I'm
No,
not
you're right.
talking about bad dudes. I'm just talking about regular good guys. We'll have to sit back and kind of digest that for a second and be like, that's interesting, right?
Interesting, right?
Right? That's
That's the word we
interesting.
probably use. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
interesting, right?
yeah. That's because at its core, we're socialized as men to define what it means to be a man by distancing ourselves from the experience of women and girls. And I believe this is just a Tony Porter thing. I believe at the end of the day, women, collectively speaking, are a much better representation of humanity
Mm,
than men, collectively speaking. I ain't trying to offend our brothers. I'm just telling my truth,
right.
right? That women, collectively speaking, are a much better representation of humanity than men, collectively speaking,
Mm,
right? We got wars popping up right now all around the world. Just what if women were in charge, collectively speaking, instead of men? Would it look different? It's a fair
right.
conversation.
Yes.
I believe, collectively speaking, women are a much better representation of humanity. And I
Mm,
believe that for we as men, defining manhood by distancing ourselves from the experience of women and girls, we are in essence distancing ourselves from our own humanity. So for
mm.
me, there's a lot for us to learn in all of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of beauty in what you said there, and I think collectively you're right. And I think. Do you think that your experiences were shaped early on, right? When you told me you confided more in women in the hospital that you worked in, right? Was that by, now I want to say by accident, but did you kind of gravitate to that because of their personalities and how they would almost nurture the conversations as opposed to maybe the men we might be like, whatever. So is that where that kind of started for you?
Well, with the men, and I did have men in my circle, there's no question about that.
Hmm.
No question about that. But I had more women who were
Right.
paying attention to these issues in the community that I was working in. But I'm not going to shortchange and say there was no men, but there were more women because I was not only looking at the impact of racism and
Hmm.
classism, I was also looking at the impact of sexism, meaning we were looking at group oppression. In the United States of America, there's several forms of group oppression that impact us. There's racism, there's sexism, there's
Hmm.
classism. Those are the three that we know more so than others. But there's also ageism, right? There's ableism, right? That also there's religion and domination in religion. Like we all know the term anti-Semitism, but
Hmm.
beyond just the oppression between Christians and Jews, there's just also the power around all this. And when you look at power through religion, you're really more so looking at Protestant, right? And I'm not going to create an ism for that, but there's several forms of group oppression. And when you're doing work to interrupt one form of group oppression, you really can't do that most effectively unless you're at least paying attention to others. So, for example,
Right.
if my work is to disrupt racism, if I'm not doing that work through an intersectional lens that also looks at sexism, then my work to interrupt racism is going to most benefit Black and brown men and less benefit Black and brown women.
Mm,
I can't be invested in disrupting racism and not be invested in disrupting sexism.
right.
If I'm also not invested in disrupting classism, then my work is going to best benefit Black and brown men, Black and brown women, but those who are middle class or upper class, not those who are financially poor. There's a sister by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw. I want to lift her up. She coined the term intersectionality, which really speaks to, if we're going to do this group oppression work, we have to do it through an intersectional lens. And so back to your question, I'm in spaces doing anti-racism work, particularly at that time as it related to the substance use program I was running, but it put me in rooms with women who were doing anti-sexism work. And I became attracted to that work because what they were teaching me, they were nurturing me and teaching me. And I'm saying nurturing because I didn't get it right away. So they were like, they staying to the table with me with a lot of patience and a lot of tolerance,
Right.
many of the unconditional love. These are many aspects of nurturing, characteristics of nurturing. So they mentored me, they nurtured me, and they taught me a lot about sexism and what it means to live in a male-dominated society. That really was attractive to me because in my anti-racism work, what they were teaching me is, Tony, you can do what you are waiting for white men to do. Like white men will say racism is bad, but there's only a few white men that you would know that would truly expose it.
Right.
Talk about it at its core. Talk about experience they've had and been a part of. You don't get the average white man to do that.
Right.
I remember this cat named Mike Leathers that I used to work with in doing some anti-racism work. He was originally from Mississippi and he was here in New York. Most of what he knew, or not most, but a lot of what he knew around anti-racism work, he had learned from me and others. But we would be in a space and we could say the same exact thing. But for me, saying it, people would be like, that's cool.
Right.
That makes sense. Other folks would be like, here they go again. But when Mike said it, it would chill a whole damn room out, right? Hearing that come from him. What women were teaching me was if you take on sexism, being part of the dominating group as a man yourself, you can really expedite some of the efforts that we're trying to, like in that man box, if I come back to that man box, in that man box also teaches us to have less value in women. It teaches us that women are the property of men. That's why domestic violence flourishes, right? The less value in women, you know, it teaches us that in so many aspects. It makes sense that a white woman makes 80 cents to $1 that a man makes doing the same exact job. And a black or brown woman makes 67 cents doing the same exact job. That's an example of less value. Another example of less value is that makes sense is what's the easiest way for a coach to tell a boy he's not playing up to par? Is to tell him he's playing like who? Girl, right? And today we don't even use girl. We use language that's much more denigrating. Language that's much more, right? Why does that work? It works because that boy has already been taught to have less value in women. And you just told me I'm alongside of women. It's used as a means of motivation, right? Boys are taught they're supposed to be here and girls are here. And I tell a boy to stop playing like a girl. I'm telling him he's down here, right?
Yeah.
Need to get himself back up here where he belongs. Coaches use it as a means of motivation, but we talk to coaches all the time. You got to figure out another way to see that. Tell them to play harder. Tell them you believe in him. I know coaches that tell girls to stop playing like a girl. Right. And the girls know what that means.
Right.
So this whole notion of less value in women and the voices of women. So if women are able to get men to speak out against sexism in a male-dominated society, we can better expedite the efforts of achieving our goals. No different than white folks need to have a voice as it relates to ending or interrupting a race construct, right? Black and brown folks can't be the only voices. White folks have to be part. And we can use that same analogy with any form of group oppression. So I became really attracted to this work because I can have an impact in interrupting sexism the way I have always wanted to see white men have an impact in interrupting racism. So, it led at the end of the day for me to have a lot of relationships with women who were doing the work, whether it was racism, sexism, classism, but doing it through an intersectional lens. So they really became part of my network, while at the same time, there's still many brothers in that space as well.
Nice. That's a beautiful journey. Is that what kind of sparked the call to men? Is that what catapulted everything for you?
Yeah, at the hospital, I was already again doing the treatment work through what we called a social justice treatment approach. And so I would host, the hospital has an auditorium there that holds about 100 people. And I would host monthly seminars. They called them Grand Round Series at the hospital. And many of them were about the intersectional approach to substance use and how to disrupt it. And it was cool for the hospital because at the end of the seminar, a handful of folks might take a tour of the unit, and of course that brings business to the hospital. It was free. Folks would get CEUs. We feed them breakfast or lunch. So it was a good deal. So after I had learned a lot about male domination, patriarchy, sexism, I began volunteering at a local program that would provide domestic violence classes for men, that men who had perpetrated domestic violence against their partners would be mandated to these programs. And I volunteered I volunteered there for 5 years, and I learned a lot about male socialization. And one of the things I learned is that men who perpetrate domestic violence are a minority of men in comparison to the rest of us. They're a small amount of men in comparison to the rest of us. Now, there's a lot of men, and domestic violence, sexual violence, violence against women and girls continues to be at epidemic proportions in our society. It continues to be one of the leading causes of injury to women in our country is violence against women and girls. So it's a lot of men, but it's a small amount of men in comparison to the rest of us. So what I began to grapple with is, while most men don't perpetrate violence against women and girls, the problem is we're silent to the violence. The problem is we are part of the collective socialization of what it means to be a man that teaches men that women are of less value, that women are the property of men, and that women are objects, particularly sexual objects. Now, while most of us as men, we're aware of that, and we can find ourselves in there, right? We can find out, my mouth is not a prayer book. And while I have a great deal of knowledge in all these spaces, I have my own inconsistencies, right? My wife be the first to tell you, right?
Your wife is the first to tell you.
Yeah, she'd be the first to tell you. So I'm not sharing this with your viewers as if I got this down to a science. I have a deep understanding of these issues, and that deep understanding also makes it very clear to me when I'm not on my game the way I'm supposed to be. It's not like I don't have my moments and times being in that man box, right? I'm saying this to say that collectively as men, there's very few of us that can say, I never do less value in women. I never do women as the property of men. And I never view women as objects, particularly sexual objects. There's very, very few of us as men that can say I'm 100 on that I got that down to a science and I'm perfect.
Right.
Very, very few men. And I'm not one of them, right? It's very, very few men. So it helps us to understand how is it that there's an epidemic of violence against women and girls happening in our society? It's a minority of men in comparison to the rest of us. And why have we collectively as men not stepped in and disrupted it?
Right.
right? And in many respects, the men who perpetrate that violence have an expectation that we collectively as men will remain silent.
Mm.
So it's kind of fair to even say that while we collectively as men don't perpetrate the violence, we are, though, part of the socialization, part of the culture, part of the fertile ground that allows these men to exist.
Mm.
So, a big part of the work of the call to men is to help develop this first generation of men having the responsibility not only to promote healthy manhood, healthy masculinity, but to really speak to and teach boys about what it means to be a healthy man, not only to help us with the challenges that some of these notions of masculinity are hurting us, but also to create a much more equitable and society for women and girls.
Yes, I agree 1,000%. I have two boys. I have a son who's 25. I have a son who's 4. So you see the big gap there. But
Hmm.
the way it's funny because the way that I'm raising my youngest is different than I raised my oldest. Right? Collectively, I've learned more about myself and how I am supposed to show up as a man. Right?
Hmm.
Not living in that box, like you said, and being more emotional, allowing him to be emotional. And I got to learn that through my oldest son. We were able to break bread and have a real conversation. And he was able to tell me where I was falling short. And I had to humble myself and say, man, you know what? You're right. Okay, I can be better here. Right. So it's funny that he now gets to see how I raise his youngest brother. And he even said, man, Dad, sometimes I'm like, I'm kind of a little mad at you. But like
Yeah.
what he said, but
Yeah.
you know what? I respect that you were willing to grow. Right.
Yeah.
And you were willing to
And
learn and listen to me.
I love that, man. And you were just operating off of what you knew, right?
Yeah.
We just pass tradition down, right? We just pass it down. And many of us as men just find ourselves on remote control,
Yeah.
just doing what was passed down on us and not really question it or having any really critical conversations. And then when we introduce men to spaces and we begin to have these conversations, our maturity around what it means to be a man grows. And then your younger child will have a different experience than
Yeah.
your older child. Like with your
Yes.
older child was real boys, it was real simple. Stop crying. What you crying
Stop
about?
crying.
Stop crying.
Stop crying.
You
Yep.
know? Tell me what's wrong. I can't understand you
Yeah.
what you're saying while you're crying. Stop crying.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, go in your room,
Right.
stay in your room until you can get yourself under control, and then you can come back
Come
out
talk to me.
here, and then
Yeah.
come back out here and talk to me like a what? And we'll
Like
say, like a
like a
man.
man.
And he's
Yeah.
6.
Yep.
And he's
Yep.
6, right?
Yep. You're right.
And we would not do that with our daughters for the most part. We would not do. She get on my knee, she can cry,
Mm-hmm.
she could tell me what's going on, and most important thing is, baby, I got you.
Yep.
Well, our sons need that same nurturing,
Totally agree.
same nurturing. You know, when you tell a 3, 4, 5-year-old boy to stop crying without really having any conversation with him about what that means, because for him, particularly when they're about 3 years old, 5 years old, maybe just a little different, but not
Mm-hmm.
much. But you take a 3-year-old boy that you tell to stop crying, emotionally speaking, when he feels bad, he cries.
Yeah.
When he feels good, he smiles or laughs.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitively speaking, that's that's what he has and what he knows about himself emotionally. So when you're leaning in on a 3-year-old boy telling him to stop crying, you are teaching him to stop feeling. Not that he stops feelings, but he
Right.
begins to stuff his
Right.
feelings, right? And then by the time he's 12, he has no idea who he is emotionally speaking. We're not nurturing his emotional well-being. We're
Right.
stifling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when he's 16 and you say, John, what's going on? You all right? His most immediate response is, I'm good. And he's not good, but that's
Oh,
his
he's not.
immediate
Not.
response.
It's
And if
so true, Tony.
and if we're operating in this box that says men don't ask for help, men don't offer help, men don't accept help, most men are not even going to say, John, are you okay?
Mhm.
right? We
Yep.
we're all caught up in this handle your business,
Yep.
you know? We
Yep.
tell you'll hear young men say, "I'm a grown man."
Mhm.
Well, in essence, what he's saying is, "I'm an alone man."
Yeah.
Right? That
Absolutely.
means I don't
Absolutely.
need a grown man. When I say I'm a grown man, most time, most men are saying, I don't need anyone. I don't
Yes.
need any help. I don't need any support. And that immediate response that I'm good, part of that is because we taught him to say that.
Yes.
Even when he knows he's not good, sometimes he doesn't even know because
Yeah.
his emotional well-being, his emotional intelligence hasn't really grown beyond anger as the emotion he has permission from us as men to express. Even there, not knowing that anger is actually fear or pain. Every time
Mm.
you get angry, you're either scared or your feelings are hurt. But we
Yep.
don't even know that. So it helps us to understand if you look at veterans, right, suicide rates amongst veterans is through the ceiling. And study in 2022 reported that over 6,000 veterans complete suicide a year, right?
Mm.
That's insane. And again, I'll come back to men complete suicide 4 times that the rate of women, right? That's insane when you
It
allow
is.
yourself to think about it. So these rigid notions of what it means to be a man are
It's
not
killing us.
only fostering an epidemic of violence against women and girls, they're killing us as men too. So yes, I really appreciate how you are today with your younger son, and then being able to connect with your older son and reestablish your relationship. I appreciate how he is with you
Yeah,
because
I do.
what he's saying to you is, I might not have got this from you, Dad, but I learned this.
Mhm.
Now you and I can come together around it, and he can even appreciate his younger brother and what he's experienced, and also feed that to his younger brother too. So his younger brother's getting it from his older brother, and he's
Yeah.
getting it from his dad. He's going to be a better person for it.
He is, man. I always say he's the best version of himself. He's not a better version of me, right? He's
Right.
an individual, and he's done so much more than I've accomplished at my life at that time at
Mhm.
25 years old. And to be able to have those conversations with him, and it's just beautiful because we lost I lost my mother-in-law a week ago, about a week ago. We buried her last week. And we were just going through it, and I was just like, "Hey man, you okay? We're at the church. You okay?" He's like, "I'm good, I'm good." And I was just like, "You know what? It's okay not to be okay right now." And then he
Yeah,
just started
yeah,
crying,
yeah.
and I wanted to make sure he understands there's space for that, for you to just cry and
Right,
me be here and just lay on my shoulder, and I'm going to kiss your head,
right,
and you're going to be all right. I'm going to rub your back, right? The same I would do for my daughter, the exact things
right,
that you said that I would not have done early on
right,
as a father.
right.
So I feel like I'm learning that. And like you said, I'm not perfect. I don't always have it together. I have my moments where I slip, where I'm
Mhm.
still learning to be a better dad, even all these years later. But I know I'm doing some things
Yeah.
right, and to the opposite end of the spectrum is my youngest son. Just this morning, right? We're in the bed. I'm sleepy. He likes to climb in the bed. So he rubs my head and then he gives me a kiss and says, "I love you, daddy."
Mhm.
So I know I'm doing something right there,
Yeah,
right? I know he's emotionally attached, right? In the
yeah.
right ways.
You
So,
are being your authentic self with him, and you're growing into that space, and
yep.
you're giving him permission to be his authentic self
Mhm.
in all things, right? Like you, I don't pass up on the opportunity to share I love you with my sons, with
Yes.
my kid. I don't pass. And my dad, who I knew loved me, right? He's never, he had never ever said to me, I love you.
Wow.
Now I knew he loved me.
You can feel it from the
Well, I
action.
could feel it, and for him, he demonstrated love in a much more tangible way
Mm.
by what he did for you, what he provided for you, and my father was a hard, hard worker, and so
Mhm.
everything, you knew he loved you, you knew he would do anything for you. He was not shortchanging you on all those tangible things to be a provider, but to talk about love. Like
Mm.
I've seen my father cry once, and my father never said, I love you.
Right.
Those are things that are important, in the lives of a boy to become a man.
Yes.
And I look, Dwayne, I've been in rooms where I would ask folks in the room, raise your hand if, and let's say it's 100 people in the room, raise your
Mhm.
hand if your dad never said I love you to you, right?
Mm.
And about a third of the folks in the room hand would go up. And for those of you who only seen your dad cry one time, join those who have their hands up. And another third of the room would go up. So either never or once, two
Wow.
room would have their hands up. That said something about what we've been taught as men in
Yep.
regards to as sharing and learning and experiencing who we are emotionally. And to then again to demonstrate love in words, right? Just public displays of affection, just all these things. And that's why I come back to women, collectively speaking, are much better representation of humanity because we as men are held hostage to this man body,
Yeah.
which leaves very, very little room for us to be our authentic selves,
Yes.
right? So you are teaching your son to be his authentic self, your younger son, and in doing that, you're required to be more authentic.
Yep.
And even as that, when we think about we as men, I could think about me, and based on some of the things we've shared, I think you're with me on that. We uh we also have authenticity kind of siloed up, right? Who I could
Mhm.
be this authentic with, who I can go a little further, who I can go a little
Yep.
further, right? So we're real conscious of how authentic we actually are. You know, we're kind of like in that role self. And then over here, I could be my whole
Right.
self.
Self.
Now,
Yeah.
and I understand that in society in general, some of that is required,
Yeah.
right? Some of that's required, but there's such a freedom, man, and authenticity, man.
Oh man, Tony, it is. It is. When I we met with our pastor when my wife we were first engaged and started to get married. And he was like, okay, Mr. Daniels, why are you marrying? Why do you want to marry this woman? Right. And I sat back in my chair and I said, because she allows me to be myself. Nothing more, no glitz and glamour. Like I show up as I am and she loves me wholly. And he sat back in his chair and he said, man, I've been doing this a long time. And that's the best answer I heard sitting in this chair.
Yeah.
And it's true. I think sometimes we're looking for the big things and, the sirens and flashing and everything's going off, right? But I just need to be me, right? And she allows me to show up and she knows I like watching my Knicks. She knows I like football on Sundays and the small things that I like, but I take care of my home. I take care of her. I nurture my kids. I do all the other stuff. And she allows me the space to be me because I need that space for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important. So I think you hit it right on the head with authenticity.
Mm, cool.
So what's one thing, Tony, that we can tell our viewers, the men in particular, for them to get out that man box? What's one thing you would ask for them to do today so they can start?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. One thing I would ask men to do today, first of all, I would ask them to try to hear what we're saying without judgment.
Mm,
These are the defense mechanisms that will come up: minimizing, rationalizing, justifying, to try to hear what we're saying with a wide open mind.
right.
One of the things that I would ask men to do is to not think about what we're saying that's wrong for
Mm-hmm.
you, that doesn't fit for you. Find what we're saying that makes sense to you,
Mm,
that you can agree with. And then I want to ask you to lean into that,
mm,
right? And that piece that you agree with, that you can lean into, I want to ask you to take that and make it a discussion piece.
mm,
People in your life that you know will tell you the truth about you, right? When I'm working with football players, uh, football players, and I'm talking about pro football players, and I'm talking about the young ones, like the rookies, like you 21 years old, 22 years old, and you have these multi-million-dollar contracts, right? And now you have this group of people that are around you all the time, whether you're going out to a club, whether you're doing this or other. Some of these, some players, you got that 5 or 6 people,
Yeah.
and this could be, I'm saying football player, it could be anybody that has those kind of means. They're young, still enjoying their life in different ways. They're like not like settled and married and on that kind of
Right.
routine. They're doing their thing. And look, I'm one to say, have fun, enjoy your life.
Mhm.
Not trying to slow that down, but what I'm asking, instead of just having yes men,
Mhm.
you need to have a no man. Who's your no
Absolutely.
man? And when I talk to young athletes, because that's why I spend a lot of time with young athletes, most of them have a whole bunch of yes men. They don't call them that. They're just their friends that they hang and run with. But within that friend group, most of them don't have a person that says, nah, that ain't cool. We ain't doing that, man. You can't.
Yeah.
Nah,
That's needed.
nah, that ain't gonna work. If you do this, X, Y, most of the time within that friend group, to stay in that friends group, I need to co-sign whatever you
Mhm.
say. I'm saying that's not healthy for you. You gotta have people in your circle who said, nah,
That ain't it.
that ain't it. Right? And so what I'm saying to your viewers is don't go to the person that co-signs everything. Take from this conversation the thing or things that worked for you and go to the group of people that you can have those critical, brave conversations with and share that with them and begin a conversation there. If you do that, that conversation will lead to other self explorations and really help you on your journey of healthy masculinity.
Love it. I think that's great, and that's all it is, right? For me, I always talk about the 1%, just doing 1%, right? And that 1% might be that the one thing that you find from this conversation that you take and you drive it and spark another conversation that reaches another person. And if we're doing that collectively, we start to reach
Mhm.
more and more people. So I love that idea, and I hope that's what someone does after hearing this. So I have one more question for you, Tony, because I know you got to go, but every time I have someone, the last question I always ask is, when you hear the term "leave it better," what does that mean to you?
Wow, that to me, man, leave it better. You know, I think as I'm getting older, I think of my legacy in the work I've been in. I think of, you know, people being invested in how I live more than how I died.
Mm, mm,
Uh, I think of people celebrating my life more than mourning my life.
yes, yes.
I know that, many times I could be on a podcast or speaking to a group of people or whatever, and a large percentage of the room is white folks, right? And I know that, you know, 50 years ago, that would be a rarity. 100 years ago, it would just not happen,
Not exist.
right? I know that people have given their life and their life work to give me that opportunity. Leaving the world better than, I'm saying the world now, better than, you know, the communities, the world, better than I was birthed into it. I also know that it's not about instant gratification.
Right,
And we live in a society, United States, is rooted in instant gratification. Everything is making me feel better now.
right now. Yep. Microwave mentality is what I call it.
Man, we got pills for everything. We
Yep,
got we got answers to everything that is about instant gratification.
absolutely.
I know that a lot of what I give my life to, the fruits of that, I'm not going to be here to experience. And I'm okay with that because others have done that to give me the opportunity to live and to do the thing that I do.
Yeah, beautifully said. And that's how I feel. That's why I started the platform. I'm kind of like what you spoke about earlier, just like I just felt it was needed. There was so much chaos and negativity in this world. And I'm like, what can I do instead of complaining and just talking about it? How can I contribute to make this place a little bit better? Right. And I said, well, let me interview people that are doing the work, like real work and making spaces and places and people better. So when I'm long gone, like you said, I may not even see the results of this work, that it collectively someone might come across this interview and say, man, that Tony, man, really hit home for me, and that changes that person's life. So it means I've done my job,
Yep.
right? And if my kids can see it and go back and play 10 years from now or whatever years it looks like, and he's like, man, I'm so glad I still got a piece of dad here that I can listen to and carry with me, right? So those things are important. So thank you for sharing that. And the last thing, and I know I said one last question, but this is not even a question. This is more, I want people to know how they get in touch with you, how they help
Yeah.
support your beautiful, beautiful organization. Can you let them know how to do
Yeah.
that?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So the name of our organization is A Call to Men, and we're on all things social media, A Call to Men. Our website is A Call to Men, Instagram, Facebook. We're not on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Tony Porter, A Call to Men. Info at A Call to Men. You can email us on our website. All things A Call to Men. You'll find us.
All right. I'll be sure to make sure all the handles are in the posts and stuff like that so
Yes.
people know that as well. Tony, once again, I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a wonderful conversation. I had a bunch of questions for you and it just turned into something else. And those are to me are the best type of interviews. I love that because I never want anything to be scripted. It's more for me to just, glance and keep the conversation flowing. But I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, my brother, for showing up for me, because you didn't have to and taking the time. So
I
thank you.
appreciate you. Thank you, Dwayne. You take care, brother.
All right, you too, brother. Thank you for listening to Leave It Better. I'm Dwayne Daniels, and my hope is that today's conversation gave you a little more peace, a little more hope, and a reminder that how we show up still matters. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need it. And remember, when you leave it better.